We all know who Paul Kelly is, but of course, he is very busy these days getting the new building ready at the University of Guelph. And for the sake of time, Paul, I hope you don't mind if I don't read the full bio, but Paul Kelly is a legend, and we're going to let him present the Cloak board here.
Good morning. No, I'm fine. Yeah, thanks. And you got my slides ready to go? Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about Cloak board method. This device was invented by a guy named Harry Cloak in New Zealand, and it's basically an on-off switch for bees. And we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, you just click for me. Thank you. So it's all about raising good quality queens. We want the perfect conditions for getting really well-built queens. There's the genetic side of it, but then there's the physiology side. And when we're preparing cell builders, our goal is to have large queens that have been really well built because they've been built with the right conditions. Next slide, please. So this is the Cloak board opened and closed. I don't have a really good picture. I must admit, I just put these slides together this morning. So one thing I am missing is what the whole hive looks like. So I'm going to describe that to you right now. We move 2 strong hives into our home yard for each cell builder that we want to prepare. And we'll usually run 3 or 4 cell builders. So those 2 strong hives get moved in from another location so that when we set them down in our home yard, where they're nice and handy for all the grafting and so on, the bees orient to that new location. We set them up with 1 colony facing to the back, 1 colony facing to the front. We remove 1 queen from the top box, keep the queen in the bottom box. Everybody with me so far? And we just do that uniting with newspaper 3 or 4 days before we want to be preparing the cell builder. When we go to prepare the cell builder, it's a bit of a confusing job because we need a whole bunch of equipment, get everything set up. But once it's set up, it's a little less confusing. We use 4 queen excluders in each cell builder. 1 above the bottom board, so in between the bottom board and the first brood chamber. 1 above that first brood chamber. Then the cloak board, another queen excluder above that, and a 4th one on top of the second brood chamber. You might wonder why all the queen excluders. They all have a purpose. That very top queen excluder prevents bees from getting, or queens from getting up into our hive top feeders. So a queen could get up in there, especially if you happen to have a rogue queen, virgin queen that's emerged, she may well be up there. So that top queen excluder prevents her from getting up into the feeder. It also acts as a tray for our pollen patty. So when we're getting in and out of the cell builder, we can just lift that up and the pollen patty remains intact. The queen excluder that's above the cloak board, are we still with me here? Okay, the queen excluder that's above the cloak board is to prevent virgins that happen to be flying around in the area from going into a queenless colony. Because when this is closed, that top box is queenless. And virgins drifting around looking for a home can just go in there. And we've seen this happen before. So if you want to prevent that from happening, you just have to prevent access. The queen excluder on the very bottom of the hive, if we happen to have a situation where a cell emerges and we have a virgin in the hive and we can't find her, we can shake everything outside. Everything has to move back in, and so we've screened out the virgin. So that's the reason why there's 4 queen excluders there. It does get a bit confusing. So next slide, please. But we want to have good quality queens, so you can see the size there, and our goal is to have as many queen cells as possible. So this is our goal, to get those perfect grafts. Doesn't work out every time, but assure me, but I only take pictures of the perfect ones. So just so you keep that in mind. Those frames that I'm using there, I learned this from Tibby Szabo, that if you use a very thin frame, you get much less bridging happening in between the cells. So a really thin frame, and if you get that packed tightly between other frames, you won't get nearly as much comb built around the cells, which makes them a lot easier to handle. So you saw some of these skinny frames in Kelly's presentation. Because they're so thin, we can fit 11 frames in a box. And in our top bird chamber, we graft on a weekly cycle, but the queens take 10 days. So there's an overlap of 3 days where you have 2 frames in that top box. And we can do that by having 11 frames in there. And when we pull the one graft frame out, when it's mature, you're back to 10 frames in the box, and it works out quite well. We don't take the frames out to incubate them. We incubate them right in the Cloak board hive. Next slide, please. So here we are preparing. This is a Monday. We have a set weekly schedule. So on a Monday, we prepare the cell builder. On our Tuesday, we do the graft. And on the Thursday, we pull the slide out on the Cloak board. And what we're trying to do is take advantage of both swarming behavior and emergency queen rearing. So there's 3 reasons bees raise queens: swarming, emergency queen rearing, and supersedure. We're using 2 of those factors working in conjunction at the very first part of the Cloak board method. So when we put that graft in, it's going into a hive that's super packed full of bees. That's the swarm impulse, but there's no queen. There's your emergency impulse. When we pull that slide out on a Thursday, we're going back to just the swarm impulse because it's a very strong hive full of bees. But when that slide is pulled out, the bees in the top box can still smell a queen. And by using this method, we can sustain the cell builder throughout the year. It's queen right in the bottom bird chamber, so that the queen can keep laying. But I do have to say, once every 3 weeks, roughly, we will add frames of emerging brood from other hives, just to prop them up and keep them really strong. So they do need a bit of support there. So what we're doing here is we're shaking, I like to think, every bee off every frame in the cell builder. And I'll shake those off into a new box, as you can see there. And then I pass those frames to the people that are standing at that ladder. And those are, we'll say, junior employees that are learning how to find queen cells. But their job is to find the queen cells, and then they pass it on to, you can see my former colleague Dave sitting down there. We let him sit down on this job. But he double checks each of the cells for rogue cells. And the first person, if they've missed one, they get fired. And Dave gets to fire them, and then I get to rehire them, and then we keep on going. Now, we do make a point of pointing it out when people make a mistake, because it's really, really important to not miss any cells. And by having that double checked, we have very consistent results. So let's move on. That's what happens when you don't get those cells out in time, or if you've grafted a larva that's a little bit too old, or if somehow you've missed a rogue cell on a queen. Very disappointing when you check on your hives and you find that. So we really try to miss that. Next, please. But when we're training people to look for cells, we get them to look across the surface of the cell and then turn the frame upside down. Because those cups and cells, and it doesn't matter whether a cup or cell, we're going to destroy anything that is even remotely close to one. But you get a chance to see them really well when you turn the frame that way. Next, please. We use pure pollen, pure pollen patties. So we collect the pollen ourselves, store that in the freezer, and make up patties that with just sugar syrup and pollen. We can afford to do this for a few cell builder colonies, and there's nothing better than pure pollen. So we make up the patties that way. But next, please. We also make sure that right next to the graft, we have really good frames of pollen. This is easier to do in the spring than later in the year. So later in the year, we'll find frames of pollen in other hives that we can bring in to insert into the colonies. So this is on a Monday again. We've gone back to the cell builders, and the first thing we do, we find the queen down the bottom, cage her, and then we look in the second brood chamber to see what the results are for the previous graft. And that way, this is on a Monday. Those cells are going to be coming out on Friday. But on Monday, we know how many nukes we need to make up or how many cells we have to sell and so on. So this is a quick check just as we're starting the process of rebuilding the cell builders. And to rebuild them on the Monday, we shake all the bees off, remove any wild cells, and then we structure the hive in the way we want it. In the top box, there's a pollen frame, next to the graft frame, and then right next to that, a frame, as Kelly mentioned, with a very small amount of larvae to attract the nurse bees to that location. Other than that, it's all capped brood in the top box and foundation frames, so they have somewhere to build wax, and feed frames and so on. So we've done 2 videos on this topic. They're the most confusing videos that we've done. And it was a challenge to try and explain this, and I can't explain it all right now. But if you are going to watch those, make sure you watch both of the videos, and then you might have to watch it 4 or 5 more times to really get what we're doing. And of course, it's changed since we did the videos. There's a few we never stop trying to improve. But I think that's everything. Let's leave it like that.